Hello, and welcome to the South Coast Artists Index, where artists, performers, and writers, as well as curators, directors, and supporters, anyone with ties to the creative community, drops by to introduce themselves to you. We'll talk about their beginnings, their vision, their passion, and so much more. The South Coast Artist Index podcast is brought to you in part by Heavenly Spirits, who invites you to celebrate the art of life and creative communities everywhere. Learn more at heavenlyspirits.com.
This is Ron Fortier with another episode of the South Coast Artists Index podcast. And every once in a while, or more often than not, I always say that we have a very special guest. All of our guests are special. But there aren't too many guests where I can remember if I've met them before, that I can remember having met them and the circumstances, that's just the way my brain works. I mean, I can tell you stuff that happened and go back into a building 50 years later and stand on the spot and say, this is exactly where it happened. Or maybe it's just a fantasy. But with that in mind, I'm going to have our guests do what I always ask our guests to do, and that is to introduce themselves and spell their names.
All right, Ron, good afternoon. This is Adrian Tió, and that's Adrian, Adrian, like in Yo Adrian, and the last is TIO. Short and sweet. Short and sweet.
I'm only going to assume that they're waiting for you to spell the rest of your name, the last name. TIO what?
They always do. Is there more? And I go, that's enough.
It is weird. It is strange. I've brought this up in past podcasts, but my first intern when I worked at this agency, her name was Anne Margaret, and the stories she would tell. What's your last name, dear? Margaret. No, dear, that's your middle name. I think I know what my middle name is. And
Right.
I don't have one, by the way.
Right.
So what's your name? Anne Margaret.
Well, I had a colleague at Bowling Green State University. His name was Ralph Warren. And every time he met the director's wife, she would go, well, which name is yours? And he goes, well, I'm Ralph Warren. Please call me Ralph, but you can call me Professor Warren. She goes, but you can't have two first names. And that went on like that for his entire career. She just could not understand that Warren, like Elizabeth Warren, well, she's got two first names.
John Prine, call that child James Henry, the boy with two first names. That was a really horrible one of his. I mean, it's a great song because he wrote great songs, but he could really write some real gut-punching. Now I got it stuck in my head. I can't get it out. But I do remember when you were the dean of CVPA.
Yep.
And we were at the very beginnings of doing this in earnest. It was starting to trend out of a hobby to a passion stage.
Right.
And we discussed SMU. You were. Dean of CVPA at UMass Dartmouth. I left that campus when there was no CVPA. It was still an art department in the College of Arts and Sciences. And what was then referred to as Group 6, or CVPA, was a hole in the ground.
Right.
And
so pre-72?
I got out of there in 75, yeah.
Okay.
And Dietmar Winkler, I think, was the first and probably longest dean there, right? So, and what connection did you have to that campus to be so knowledgeable? That's what blew me away.
None.
No,
I'm an import. Matter of fact, I knew Dietmar Winkler from the Midwest because we were competing universities in Illinois.
Yeah.
And he was, I think, the director of the School of Art at the University of Illinois, Urbana-Champaign, the university. Yeah. And I was the director of the School of Art at Northern Illinois University. We'd run into each other at these art conferences dealing with arts administration. And we'd just say hello in passing because he would always give me the look because I was at the other Illinois university. And then years later, I would meet him here. And I go, we've met before. And he says, really? He says, yeah. Actually, we ran into each other at Kansas City Art Institute. He goes, I think you're right. So we got into so he's my only connection to here.
Wow, that's because one of my classmates, BFA 75, John Roberts, is a printmaking instructor at one of those campuses, either yours or his. It was either Urbana-Champaign or it was the other place.
It had to be Urbana-Champaign.
Yeah, and then you mentioned Kansas City Art Institute.
Mm-hmm.
There's also connection to the Cleveland Art Institute for some reason. And that was one of the original reasons for creating the Artist Index, or back then the Artist Profiles, was that, and we didn't realize that the technology would eventually make it easier, because people are cussing about AI, and that's a conversation for another day.
Oh, yeah.
But when you're building a database and you're extrapolating transcripts and editing transcripts and then doing meta tagging and keywords and so on and so forth.
Right.
The synergy is like absolutely incredible. I think Andrew Morgan was at Kansas City, who was the chair of the art department at the University of Miami. Who
you did your graduate work.
That's where I did my graduate work.
Yeah.
So it's phenomenal. But I'll never forget the words you said. Ron, you and I are probably the only two individuals on this campus that know that there's an orchestra pit.
That's true.
And I was like,
Wish they keep covered.
And I was so stunned when you said that I didn't react and say, well,
Yeah.
how could you possibly know that, and why don't other people know that?
Yeah, and I'd actually been down there, looking at the space. They used to have it for places. It was supposed to be the shop to build sets and things like that and bring them up.
Right. That's where I was offered my job for the Boston Ballet as the chief set designer.
Yeah,
And
exactly.
I could check into that spot.
You know exactly what it is.
Yeah.
What's interesting about UMass Dartmouth is that I came at a time when it was trying to develop its identity, I think, a little bit further, because it had morphed so far from, the original incarnation. But even before that, when I was the connection for me was when I was dean, I needed to figure out where the heck all these alumni are, because CVPA is a thing, but before CVPA, actually it was called the College of Applied Art. College of Applied Arts and Media, something like it. It was not called the College of Visual and Performing Arts until that building was completed. Before that, I want to say, if you look at the structure, I'm blanking on it, but when they made the move from being southeastern Massachusetts to, what was it before that?
It was SMTI.
SMTI, that was it, Smitty,
yeah.
right.
And I think my class came in just not too far after the transition from SMTI to SMU.
To SMU, yep.
Right.
And I remember that SMTI thing because if you look at the book on the history of the whole structure, and of course there are preceding institutions, one in Fall River, one in New Bedford.
Durfee Tech and New Bedford Tech.
And Nibbit, yeah, exactly. And what was interesting was that there was a bit in there about the founding colleges, because there were 4 colleges an SMTI was put together. And one of them was a College of Arts and Sciences. One of them, I believe, was a College of Business. Maybe nursing was a third one. No, engineering was a third one. And the fourth one was Applied Arts. I'm not getting the name quite right, but it was not called Visual and Performing Arts, but I think it was Visual and Applied Arts. And that was the 4th college.
I didn't know that college existed.
Yeah, it was,
I always thought it was an art department. I thought
we were in
was
their building.
Textile engineering.
Well, that would be engineering.
Versus science and engineering.
Well, there's no science in engineering.
There is no science
No,
in
it's the
engineering.
College of Arts and Sciences.
Right.
Then there was a College of Engineering, which had textile engineering in it.
Right,
Actually,
okay.
Judith Klein's husband,
Yes.
Andre,
Yeah,
has his degree in textile engineering from
Right.
SMTI.
Right.
He goes back that far.
Right.
Graduate of maybe 67,
Right.
something like that. But it was kind of interesting because I go, okay, so if I'm looking for alumni, I got to look at SMTI. I get that. I go, before that, I got to go to Bradford Durfee in Fall River, and then I got to look at Nibbit and New Bedford, and they go, now you got SMU, and now we're called CVPA, but somewhere along the line, we not only acquired people from the Swain School of Design in New Bedford, but just before that, they picked up people from the now defunct Boston State College. And people kind of draw a blank because they forget that the older academic buildings of Mass Art are the former buildings of Boston State College. So when they got in there and they had these faculty they needed to disperse, the ones that were in art and design actually came to SMU. And one of them was I used to have these all memorized pretty well, but we had a musician that came in. We had an art historian.
Vince Ludi.
Maybe. Another one of the art historians.
Mary.
Maybe. I'm not sure if it was her or not.
yeah.
There was a textile designer that came in, and there were a couple of painters that came over as well. And the musician was, it was a guy. He was a specialist in Brazilian symphonic music. That was his big thing. I'm blanking on his name. But so anyway, I'm teasing this all out, and I'm talking to people in alumni affairs, and they don't know any of this stuff. And at the same time, that's when Fred Geffen was writing the history of the university, which spans that time, and it was published, I think, in 2008. So I had gotten there just a year before, and one of our alumni, she was a designer that was working with him. And so I'm having these conversations and looking at all these connections back and forth, because one of the challenges that I had was that I've got CVPA, right, the main building, which is called the Center for Visual and Performing Arts as a building. It's not the word college in front of that. But then I've also got the Star Store, the former Star Store. And looking at how the people are placed and realizing as I went through looking at people's biographies a little bit, I had 5 people from the Swain School of Design still involved in the college in some way. One of them was a staff member at the main camp, down to the Star Store. She was helping running the building. She used to be the last president of Swain's executive secretary, and that was Barbara Lynch. She stayed down there doing a similar job for me in that space. We had 3 faculty, the late Mark St. Pierre, in printmaking and photography. Eric Lintela in sculpture.
Yes, I remember.
And Sig Severin Haynes, who actually was one of the first graduates to get a degree out of the Swain School of Design. Got his MFA at Yale. Great things. Came back, was teaching at Swain when they merged. So I'm trying to wow, these are a lot. We're talking about a bunch of stray cats here. So I said, so the last time you guys ever did a reunion of any kind focused on the college, what did you do? And it was during the term of one of my predecessors, and he said, Michael, the art historian.
Mike Taylor.
Michael Taylor. He said, well, yeah, we hosted it here. I said, here? He says, yeah, here in CVP. I said, really? I said, anybody show up from Swain or from Nibbit or any of these other things? He goes, no. And so I talked to the guys at Swain. By then I'd got this crew of ruffians that my buddies, I used to call them, to talk to them because they go, I need to know more about what's going on with Swain because nobody in this campus knows a darn thing about Swain.
And without opening up a vein.
Yes, well, it was interesting because, it's you talk about, on campus they would talk about, well, we had this wonderful merger back in 1988 and we da-da-da, and then when you hear from the Swaineys say, oh no, it was a hostile takeover. So where the truth is in the middle is that Bruce Yenawine wanted to bring a graduate degree, an MFA, because he thought adding an MFA to the Swain School of Design would help enhance their reputation, bring in more enrollment. And they already had the BFA, so the BFA was new. I want to say they started with it maybe in the late 70s. Before that was a diploma school. But they got on board, got their degree, and they brought this group of people in a program called artisanry. And out of Boston University, because the president at the time, a guy well-known, I'm going to administrator.
That was Boston University.
Yep.
Which put a bookmark in it. I wanted to speak to you a little bit more about that.
All right. Yeah. So the president was this guy named Joseph Silber. And Silber had a reputation for coming in and trimming and changing and reforming universities. And according to what the people that came from there on artistry told us, because we had a department of artistry, they were always located down at the Star Store. They said, yeah, well, he decided that if they were going to become a research university well regarded, they didn't need to have a program called artistry. So he offered it up, and anybody could make a plan to kind of acquire it. So Yenawine bid on it because it included, I want to say, 5, maybe 6 faculty in four different media areas, but they would bring with them the MFA degree because he was kicking that to the curb too at the time. So Swain got in on this thing, not realizing that when you do that, you're not only you get the equipment. So a lot of the equipment that we had in the Star Store up until 2 years ago, if it was in jewelry making, if it was in the fiber studio, that stuff all came from Swain, from Boston. It just moved its way down. You also acquire any debt service that's coming along with that, and you got to pay these faculty salaries. There's a group of them there. So, long story short, what happened was when the university got a hold of them and realized what's going on with Swain, the university got involved because Swain was going into receivership. From what I have pieced together, they acquired too much debt in the cost of bringing the personnel and supplies from BU, and it was going to basically bankrupt them, because the only way you can pay for a graduate program is you got to have a boatload of people at the undergraduate level paying the bills.
Right.
Couldn't do it.
The
Couldn't swing it.
enrollment wasn't on
Yeah.
par.
So it was kind of a lifeline, and ironically, I was talking with the mayor of New Bedford at the time, Lang. Scott Lang, and we were having this chit chat, and I said, this is really interesting history about this whole merger and all that. And we're going on, and I'm just chatting away, like I'm doing now. And he goes, "Oh yeah, I remember this." I says, "You remember this?" He says, "Oh yeah, I was the lawyer for the board of Swain." I said, "Really?" He says, "Yeah, I helped to effect the merger." Oh, we got to talk. So lots more stuff going on, and found out that they did get all the equipment, but to retire all that debt, that's why all the buildings that here in New Bedford were sold off, went back private, because they had to retire the debt service from all those buildings.
Right.
So ironically, what happened was that they also acquired some scholarships, and the pool of monies that were used to help do things for Swain and that were tied to Swain. I actually found that there was one scholarship that we were offering that was originally from a farmer somewhere here in New Bedford, maybe in the South End. He left in his estate that there would be this scholarship for someone in art. I can't remember if it was drawing, illustration, or painting, but there was always a scholarship tied to it. But it was originally, I believe, with the Swain and came with them when we merged them. So we still offer it. And then I realized that they had a pool of money basically set there, about $45,000, just waiting, but could only be used in the name of Swain. So I said to the university, I said, "Well, why aren't we using that?" I said, "Well, we can't touch it." "Why not?" "Well, we're not Swain." I said, "No, you are Swain. It's in our house. It's in CVPA.
Right.
We've got their equipment in the Star Store. We've actually named our gallery after
All
the same
rights and
family at the
privileges and
Crapo.
signs
It
and
all
blah,
just
blah, yeah.
moved.
Yeah.
And it never dawned on them to think out of the box on that. So I happened to have a conversation with Scott. I said, "Scott, these guys are telling me that we can't touch that money. It's just been sitting there since, 10, 12 years after the merger." And I said, "I think we should do something with it." He says, "Well, what do you want to do with it?" I says, "Well, I was thinking we would make a Swain Student Alumni Scholarship Fund out of it." He says, "Well, good, you're keeping the name." I says, "Yes, you keep the name. You can do anything you want with it. It's not tied to doing it in Swain as an entity, Swain as a concept." So we took that money, grabbed it together, and to this day, they still give it one big scholarship for design student and one big scholarship for fine art student.
Wow.
So it's like this moving deck chairs here, just trying to get them organized.
I spoke with Judy Farrar at the Ferrara Mendes
archives, right.
at UMass Dartmouth. And she said, anytime anybody wants to write a history of Swain, please have them give me a call.
Oh, they got
the
tons
thing
of
is
stuff.
getting the funding.
Yeah.
Although, and I don't know if that still exists anymore, they have, it's one of those grants where the funding comes with, I'm not that well versed in it.
Okay, yeah, it comes with a collection.
It comes with
it's a sustainable grant.
Exactly, and the other thing too is the tethers, tentacles, ties between SMTI, SMU, and Swain, because there's a lot of overlap or a lot of again those connections. Ed Togneri, I believe at one point was an interim president or of Swain. He was associated with Swain.
Okay.
I don't know for sure. This is based on anecdotal information, and someday to get the funding to hire somebody to actually do this.
Right.
And then, as you know, he was I call him the granddaddy of acrylic paint. He worked with Beaucourt Brothers and developed the acrylic paint. It went over, they were doing the it was the failed Magnacolor.
I remember
which
that.
Smelled like kerosene. That was the biggest problem with it.
Nasty cleanup.
Right, but he did all the scientific work for that. And
right.
His story is amazing. He was a clarinet player in the USO, got punched in the mouth during a bar fight, used his GI Bill, went to art school, worked for the WPA. I mean, and these stories are important. And that's really what drives me crazy when people say, what does that matter? It's all past. But that's just like the plantation burning down all of a sudden isn't, oh, that's history.
Yeah, and it's gone.
Yeah, but
when
you
it
don't know
goes.
anything about it, really.
Right, right.
It's like having a wedding venue at Auschwitz, but that's a whole nother thing. And then there's Francisco Raposa, who was an instructor at Swain. He was my art instructor at Dartmouth High School.
Right.
He was a phenomenal watercolorist.
It was Cummings?
Cummings, my connection with Cummings was because of Francisco Raposa. I prepared my portfolio. I walked on the campus. I literally ran into Herb Cummings. And what you got there?
Yeah.
And I said, this is my portfolio. I'm going to go for my portfolio review. He says, I can do it right here. So he looks up at my portfolio, and he hands me back my portfolio. And I'm standing. He says, what are you standing there for? I said, I don't know.
What do I do?
Get to admissions. You're in. So it was that kind of loosey-goosey kind of thing. And you're going to have to come to one of our gatherings. People say, gatherings? Yeah, it's the BFA of 75.
Okay.
The painters primarily.
Yeah, yeah.
But we're in our 70s. And we get the closed throat when we start talking about these. In fact, the name of the group is Tecum. Tanieri, Elliott, Cummings, and McCoy.
Oh, McCoy,
it's almost like the forefathers from one of those Lethal Weapons series.
Or a mafia movie.
Yeah, a mafia movie. But there's just so much more to that. And again, bringing it closer to this time period, because of my marketing background, and that the reason why I fit in there is because the way my brain works. Fall River's, let's use the word struggle, of trying to develop a creative community when they had a thriving one way, way, way back when. But it was pretty much central to the Fall River Art Association. But comparatively to New Bedford, they were well shaded by New Bedford because of Swain. But we also forget that we had SMU. And there is a hand that several people have mentioned, over the years. We were given a hand, and people are like, what do you mean by that? It's a deftness, it's a touch. You can tell an SMU student, graduate, just looking at that work. I mean, it's a signature. I can't quite. Cummings was enthralled by Nicolaides, The Natural Way to Draw.
Oh yeah.
And I guess the education was so good because Andrew Morgan, who Lorenzo Andrade was a Cuban refugee. He wasn't a Peter Pan. He was separated from his mother. He was that first wave of Cubans.
Right.
These are the people who had everything to lose. They were the wealthy, the landed people.
Right.
And I heard stories from several people, a couple that my father had worked with, and it was the same story. I was minding my business out in the fields. My father comes and says, "Vámonos, ¿dónde?"
Yeah. Ahora.
Next thing you know, boom, they're floating in the straits. And he reconnected with his mother. He spent his childhood at St. Joseph's orphanage in Fall River.
Oh, no kidding.
Anyway, so he goes on to the University of Miami, and we used to carry slide sets of friends' works.
Right.
Andrew Morgan comes in, he goes through all the slide sets because he's nosy that way. There was like no walls there really, no privacy. And he said, "Whose work is this?" And he said, "That's my friend Ron. He was a year behind me." He's like, "Get on the phone, tell him to get his ass down here for an interview."
Yeah.
So the weird connectivity is the serendipity is beyond normal, right? So you got all these things swirling around, but the legacy of SMU did merge with Swain. The Swains, and I have this conversation with Don all along. I said, you know what? and even though the Star Store had nothing to do with our class, in fact, we didn't even have a building on campus when we left in 75. We were in Group 1. Group 1, or they refer to as LARTS today, liberal arts. And I remember doing a lecture for one of my marketing classes and saying to myself, there's something oddly familiar about this room. And then I realized, oh my God, it's a senior painting studio. Mm-hmm. We didn't even have facilities. The ceramics department was down on the below level floor.
Right.
Technically, from one part of the building, it's the ground floor, where Upward Bound and all those other programs are.
Yep.
They had a Reiki, not Reiki, the Japanese
raku,
a kiln,
right outside.
Yeah, like a wood pile on fire, basically.
Oh, yeah, basically, yeah.
And I think we used to pour for sculpture. We used to pour in Group 2, which was science and engineering building,
yep,
on one of the loading docks. So again, we had really no space of our own. Mm-hmm. And then the eviction. There's no other word for it of CVPA, and there's way too much to talk about any of these subjects. But we haven't even talked about the acquisition of the old New Bedford MBIT, NIBIT, those buildings on purchase. Mm-hmm. So we kind of we were. It was like going back to your parents' home, and your parents don't own it anymore. Right. And this actually happened with my brother. Did you go by mom and dad's? I'm like, no. Well, when was the last time you went by? I can't remember. Why don't you go by there anymore?
Yeah.
It's not ours anymore. It's gone. It's just a building now. It's gone. All we have is what's in our head. Yeah. So there's a lot of incredible emotion. And I've spoken to people in alumni, and you talked about you were trying to figure out what all these people are. And most of us have told them off, said, okay, it's not SMU. Yeah. We don't give a poop about UMD.
Right.
What is it that makes us all about like that?
Well, I think even though we're like nonconformists as artistic kind of people, there's an aspect of us that also needs an identity, a grounding, it's a certain kind of painter. But people, I find it interesting, one of my colleagues years ago, he was a musician, a piano player, but he would always say, when someone say, what do you do? I say, I'm a musician. Oh, okay. But when you ask someone who's in the arts that, they tell you what media they use. I'm a painter, I'm a printer, I'm a sculptor. Yeah. And he was always curious, why don't they just say I'm an artist? And that's not how we roll. We really do, and we're kind of hidebound to that. And some of us have morphed. Some of us started in design and moved into painting and vice versa and mixing things in between. It's just the way we are. But I think we also kind of have a sweet spot for the place that we actually got through. I went through 3 different undergraduate schools.
I was just going to ask you that.
I still remember the building. Well, it used to be, because where I came out, it was a defunct gymnasium that the art department on the main campus at Temple could use.
It's almost like BSU, Bridgewater State University's story.
Kind of like that, except that I was the last class when I graduated in '74. The next year, they pancaked the building, and that's where the School of Law is located now. Top flight School of Law.
Yeah.
But they had also decided to give them better space in a newer facility, which was under construction when I was there. And then eventually the main campus, Tyler School of Arts, now moved down to main campus. Mm-hmm. So they're housing the BFA, MFA programs, the BA, the BS in education are with the art department. So we went through that kind of morphing thing. And I think about it, but I don't have a good connection with that entity because I maybe ran into 1 or 2 of the faculty periodically at art conferences. My former printmaking teacher became the dean of Tyler School of Art, Rocky Toner. And Don Lancey, my drawing instructor, became the dean of Syracuse School of Art. So I ended up running into them at conferences, but not connected in the same way that I remember them on the main campus in Philadelphia. But we would always talk, and of course Rocky was always kind of really supportive, and that. And when I went out and did one of my first accreditation visits for the National Association of Schools of Art and Design, where you have to be a department chair or a dean or something to be part of that. I rolled into this committee of 3. We're checking out Georgia State, and who's there? Rocky. And Rochelle, but
Yeah.
everybody knew her, Rocky
Right.
Toner.
Right.
She was the best man on the table, basically.
Yeah.
And a great person, just a brilliant printmaker. She used to work, if you remember a little bit about etching, she
Yeah.
worked on copper plate.
Oh yeah. That
Dutch
was one of my
Warden, and
favorites.
graving
yeah.
and scraping.
Yeah.
And she was impeccable, just
Yeah.
that kind of, way beyond what I could do.
Yeah.
But when I ran into Lancy and I mentioned to him what I was doing, I think at the time I was then either the department chair at Indiana or I was up in Illinois as a school director. He just shook his head and he says, "What the hell are you thinking?" I said, "What do you mean?" He says, "You don't want to be in administration. You always wanted to be an artist. You just always were pushing against the boundaries." I said, I know, but I also know how to get those people together in a room and actually agree to something.
Yeah.
Eventually, I can kind of get them in there in a
Yeah.
positive way. And which is the segue back to asking that question about when they tried to do an alumni reception for the CVPA people, how did they go about it? And they said, well, we held it in CVPA on main campus, and we invited those people. I said, did you send a mailer out to the people from Swain? Yes. How about the people from SMU? We didn't have to do that. They're part of UMass Dartmouth. And I said, what about Nibbit and Bradford Durfee?
Yeah.
Same thing. I said, you do understand it's not the way it's going to roll. I said, I'll bet you, without you telling me, that you got absolutely nobody showed up from Swain. And he looked at me, and Michael Taylor's a pretty astute guy. He says, yeah, how'd you know that? I said, because they never took classes here. They were on New Bedford, no connection to UMass Dartmouth or SMU at the time. So why would you think you could host a reception for them to come here in basically enemy territory?
Yeah.
And it dawned on him right then why nobody would come, and next to nobody came from Nibbit or Bradford Durfee. So I go, I'm going to get these guys. I'm going to find a way. So I get my four guys, and that's, of course, Don, who you mentioned, and Chuck, and who else was it? There were two others who were involved, at all Swaineys. And I said, help me kind of figure out how to do an alumni reception that I can hold in the building, and we're going to focus on people who went through Swain and may also have a UMass Dartmouth degree, like Don.
Yeah.
Don's
Yeah,
got his
double
BFA,
degrees. Yeah,
MFA,
yeah,
right?
yeah.
Two different schools, but
Yeah.
at different times.
Right.
And I said, and I'm going to host it in the Star Store, right here in this room. And they go, why? I said, did you ever take a look at the sign for this is our big lobby area where they used to sell women's dresses or something at one time, and then down below is where the soda fountain was.
Right.
I said, did you see the sign over there? What's it say? It says Crapo Gallery. I said, yeah. I said, I took a look at photographs of the receptions of the Swain School of Design. You used to hold them in the Crapo Gallery. So let's get the word out that we're hosting an alumni reception in the Crapo Gallery. It's just now located in the old Star Store where they used to go shopping and eating and whatnot. And we got a boatload of people. We did, and we did it over a couple of days. We had a big opening reception, Pumpkinhead Ted blasting our eardrums at Gallery X. We moved the part of the reception down to what was Kroll's Gallery at the time.
Yeah.
It's a special reception there, and because they were focusing on the work of David Loeffler Smith's
Yes,
work,
yes,
right?
Yes, yeah, I remember that.
Major
Yeah,
player was Swaineys.
Yeah.
So we found a way to get the Swaineys to come back because they had a vested interest in it. And it all came because of a comment that our buddy Michael Pretagala, who's also in Hatch Street, and a Swaney, class of 72-ish maybe, he made a comment once, and I go, oh, duh, the lights go off. I said, how come you never mentioned that you're kind of in the UMass Dartmouth CVPA kind of umbrella? He says, well, I'm not. What do you mean? I says, well, I never went to school there. What do you do when you get stuff from them? So I put it in the recycling bin.
Yeah.
Why? Because there's never anything in there that mentions Swain.
Exactly.
So one of my first challenges was to convince the head of alumni affairs that when your letterhead goes out, why does it only have UMass Dartmouth on it? And she said, what do you mean? I said, well, it should have UMass Dartmouth, it should have Nibbit, it should have Bradford Durfee, and it should have Swain.
And a lot of universities do that.
And I said, because if you do that, those alumni will connect to UMass Dartmouth as the top school because they're going to see they're part of the lineage. And that's what they did. They did it, and they were stunned that all of a sudden people are coming out of the woodwork. We got a woman who went to Swain and never graduated, but she was there I think she came out like in 51 or 52.
Yeah.
And she came all the way from California to the not the first, but the second alumni reception. Did one in 2010, did another one in 2013. with a slightly different spin. I was trying to get more together all the people that were at school in the 80s, whether it was at Swain or SMU or UMass Dartmouth. Just get them all together. Same thing, had it downtown. And she was just chatting. She says, I never finished my degree from Swain, but I am a painter. I've always been a painter. I live on the West Coast. She goes, but I said, but I've always been connected. And I actually introduced her to the chancellor at the time, Davina Grossman, and she was fascinated. And she said to her, she says, well, I'm so glad that you came back to campus to visit, even though you weren't here. She understood to say that. She goes, because you were part of Swain. She goes, but next time I'm out in California, I will look you up. And a couple of issues later, the alumni newsletter has Davina with this woman in her place looking at her artwork in California, trying to foster that relationship, which before that, UMass Dartmouth had no clue how to really pursue that.
Right. I was told to get over it.
Yeah, and it's like it's so twisted. Matter of fact, one of the things that they did at UMass Dartmouth that I kind of made a snarky comment about, I'm Puerto Rican. I can't hold myself in check all the time.
Exactly.
Is that I said, so, you have all this data. You have all these email addresses of people who graduate. What do you do with them, and how do you stay in contact with them? Oh, we cut them loose. What? He says, no, we get rid of the emails because we need space for new students. I said, no. New students can't use the same email because if they have the same initials or the same initial first name, you just add a new number, like 2, for the next person, and you keep them, and you batch them by their graduation year. That's how you build an alumni database. And you would think I was inventing, Swiss cheese. I mean, how is this so hard for you to understand? But it never dawned on them that by cutting that away, they're cutting away any chance of connecting with alumni. It says, how do you develop that rapport? Because the people who, about 25 years after they graduate, they're going to have capacity to start returning something to their alma mater. And for most people, I don't know about you, but most people think of giving something back to their undergraduate alma mater because that's where they fostered friends, relationships, first wedding, second wedding, whatever. In there, it's not with graduate school. It's with the undergraduate school.
Exactly.
And I could not believe these guys were just throwing it away.
Yeah, they were kind of clueless. A couple of things before I forget. Tony or Anthony Miraglia.
Yeah.
I was on the student selection committee. So I'm assuming Tony was on that cusp. He was the first hire, but the last faculty member on the SMU side. The
SMTI, the tail end, yeah.
And the whole. Again, we weren't aware.
Well, he came on board around 78, I think. If I remember.
He came in. He came in around 75.
Okay.
Because we weren't aware that there was a college. We thought we were a department in.
College of Fine and Applied Arts.
Exactly. Yeah. Of arts and sciences.
Yeah. Because you were in that building.
Because and it was kind of interesting, and I'll never forget him because his portfolio is still stuck in my head.
Oh yeah.
It still affects me that he did the chairs.
You know where he went to school? Cleveland Institute of
Art.
He's a Cleveland guy.
Oh my God! I wonder if he knows Jerry Winter.
He very well might.
Again, it's and Don Wilkinson. We were talking about this Sunday. How it is just about 3 degrees of separation.
Yeah.
And Don says sometimes even less.
And even sometimes even less.
So there's that aspect. I was talking about we really had the wind in our sails compared to Fall River because of Swain and also because of SMU, which kind of just Swain was such a powerhouse, and then the absorption of it into SMU. It's like families. You got that uncle who was always accused of doing something, and then you find out, well, it was partially true, but not in the way you understood it to be. There were extenuating circumstances. And then the other thing is, I still think is when New Bedford Durfee Tech and NIBIT, New Bedford Institute of Technology, 2 weaving schools, one from Bedford Durfee from Spindle City. They were the largest spinners of cotton yarn in the world. And New Bedford Institute for Technology, they were the largest weavers. They had more weaving acreage than anybody else. known for fine cottons, lawns, and percales. I still don't know what a lawn is unless you put it between my fingers. But Wamsutta was synonymous with the finest of cotton goods.
Largest spinning mill in the world,
Exactly.
I think.
So you got these two technical schools who meet in the cow pasture in Dartmouth and decide they're going to hire a world-class architect,
Right.
which still is mind-boggling beyond belief. There's a story there.
Oh, big one.
I still say we were there when the concrete was still curing. You could still smell it. And I remember teaching in Violet building, which is the northernmost part of the campus towards the Ring Road. And the students complaining about the leakage in rainstorms just when you go up to nursing upstairs. And I said, that leak is older than you guys.
Yeah.
That leak was here when I was here. Anyway,
Right.
so that kind of thing. But been speaking with a couple of people about Maggie Peirce. We were lucky enough to get 2 podcasts on her. She and Howard Glasser, who was the calligrapher of calligraphers.
Yep.
They had met in Belfast. The story there is kind of amazing in itself. And again, there's so many layers, so many chapters.
Right.
But they brought in the Eisteddfod with English music theater and headliners from that ilk, that folk genre and so on and so forth. But at the same time, and I've spoken with Colin Williams. He and I ran parallel paths at SMU. I was a stage manager. I met Rod Serling, Anthony Burgess. I mean,
neat.
I'm dropping these names, and people look at me like, "Yeah, that was SMU." Jefferson Airplane, the 4th stop on Rolling Thunder, Bob Dylan's Rolling Thunder National Tour. I think 3rd or 4th stop. I'm not convinced of 4th, but
They
it
were
could have been 3rd
those
or 4th.
outside or inside?
No, they were inside in the Fuller. What was the Fuller Gymnasium? I think it was called.
Yep.
Frank Zappa. It just goes on and on and on. The Clash.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then somebody said to me something I had said many times. What happened?
Yeah.
What happened? So now you come in on campus. You come from this diverse background. You have an administrative bent, let's put it that way, comparative to, most faculty. When you say, hey, you're going to be chair, you're up.
Right.
Oh, no, please, anything but that. I'll wash your car every week. Just don't make me do it.
Right.
Because now you become the enemy. Because now from a buddy, a faculty member, a friend and colleague, now you become, that guy.
Oh, yeah.
Because you got to answer to that higher power. So all of that involved, and then I'll ask you about BU. I don't want to forget about that.
Yep.
How did you come into? When did you come into SMU or UMass? Why? How? What were the circumstances? What did you learn? How did it change your, change your trajectory?
I got recruited. There was a national search, and they brought in, I think, 3 candidates to campus, and we did our dog and pony show. And one of the things I did for my presentation was I did not do a stand in front of a bunch of people with slides and stuff like that. I actually opened my printing portfolio that I had developed with my artist books and broadsides and explained to them about how these were collaborative efforts and how I work with others to make the paper. We had hand set the type, talking to the poets, working with people in translation because we were doing facing text in Spanish and English. And passing some of them around, and the faculty, oh my God, this guy's an artist too, and he's also organized, So, and Tony made a comment about that. He says, "Damn," he says, "you are organized," and that's kind of what won me over, I think, with them, where they had, and I think if you look at the history of the deans at CVPA since its inception, have always either come out of music. And then maybe at least one, Michael Taylor out of art history. But they, for some reason, came out of the music side of the house, and they had never had anyone, to my knowledge, that was a dean of that particular college whose background was in fine arts. So this is a whole new wrinkle. And of course, Winkler was design. So
design, yeah.
I'm a little different animal, even though I've got design instincts.
Yeah, from the Bauhaus.
Yeah, exactly,
Yeah.
exactly. So, and I think that was one of the reasons that they decided that it was time to bring someone in from a different part of the college who had a different skill set. And I had an affinity for music because the interesting thing about CVPA is there isn't a big PA part. It's just music. But you have to be aware of what their needs are. And I find that most people in fine arts have no real understanding that they have needs for equipment, just like sculptors need equipment that oftentimes just sits there for a while, but when they need to use it, they got to have it. Music's just like that. And but they're also attracting a different audience into the building than we can attract, because music can be very collaborative in a very immediate sort of way. You don't have to take lessons. You need to have a voice, or you already know how to play certain instruments and you're good enough in high school, you're good enough here. You don't have to be Juilliard trained to be in whatever performance they're
And
doing.
we had an opera department.
What's that?
We had an opera department.
Well, you had an opera program. You had a couple of courses in
Okay.
opera, but it was not a department.
Well,
We-
the Colberts treated it as a
Yeah, they've never had anything in theater or
Okay.
opera.
because a SMUTCO or SMU Theater Company was more of a student
It still is.
organization
It still
versus
is.
under the auspices of the college. Yeah.
Exactly. So, and it's not under the college. So it's because it's interesting about theater.
Yeah, I said other than.
Yeah, because
being
they're
on the
fully
outside.
funded by student affairs.
Right.
Ergo, it cannot be connected to a department.
Right.
So, and that's why the auditorium is actually named. It's a memorial. I'm going to blank this guy's name.
Oh yeah, me too.
I want to say Bruce. I don't think it's Bruce, but he was the guy that attracted people to come to SMU who had an affinity for basically an affinity for theater, but also needed to have a kind of a career of another kind. It could be in business and then join this theater group. And that's actually how the guys in New Bedford Theater, the Festival Theater, George and Armand,
Armand, yeah.
they were students of his
Yeah.
at Bridgewater State, and they came here to do some of the theater work at SMU because they had the facilities for it,
Right.
and that's how they got started and moved into doing the New Bedford Festival Theater.
Right.
So
And that whole theater was botched
oh well,
because of how the state got involved in the building, the architecture, and
Yeah.
that was supposed to be a 1,200 seat theater, and it turned into like an 860 seat auditorium or something. The sight lines were completely crap.
Yep.
And the pin rails were supposed to be back on the exterior, walls of the wings, and it was on the proscenium line, which was a whole. I still remember that Vermont dance company where the bus broke down. They came in late.
Yep.
And there's this one part of their, and they usually, I remember. Dancers would always come in, and with 1 foot, they would feel every square inch of floor, and they would have tape. And if there was a soft spot or whatever, they would put a mark there so they would
Yeah,
know.
yeah.
They didn't have time to do any of that. And this guy did a flying jeté stage left, bang, right into the rail that should not ever have been there.
Yeah,
Not in
yeah.
a theater,
Right,
in a real theater.
right.
So, there was all that.
Well, I think the design for that was intended to be both a theater and an auditorium,
Right, because
but
the
in
rolling
time,
doors and such, yeah. But
yeah,
they,
because
again,
as you mentioned before, they've got the pit is there, they've got the extension covering the
Right,
pit, which nobody realized. You can not only take the cover off,
Right.
but you can actually get underneath the pit, and that's where actually the stagecraft was supposed to take place. It's a huge ass shop.
Right, it
There is
is.
a big
It
shop
is.
down
It
there,
is a
still
big
there.
shop, yeah.
And when I was working with Terry Burton, who was the former dean of the library, one of the things we were working on was making sure that the theater group could get down there and use that space, but that they use the space safely. There were a lot of problems down
Right.
there. A lot of basically security was trying to keep them out of there because they were building stuff down there not in a positive kind of way.
Right, there was ventilation issues and
Yeah,
all that.
so
But
we
then
got-
again, there was also ventilation issues
Everywhere.
in printmaking because we had open vats of
Yeah,
acid,
which are gone.
and we had vats of kerosene-soaked wood shavings.
Yep,
And
everybody
people would be
did.
smoking while they would
Everybody did.
clean
Oh,
up their
yeah,
plate.
yeah.
So, and there's way more to talk about. But one more thing, SMU, UMass, Swain related. Alison Syward, I
sure.
really would love to speak with her. The last time I spoke with her, I think, I don't know, because a bunch of us speak about this. There was the and I always tell these stories with friends to make sure that they're going to come back and say, oh yeah, what happened to that? versus like, no, I never heard of that. Like, you
Right,
know,
right.
it's in your befuddled head. There was the tap on the shoulder senior year. And the tap on the shoulder was you had to stand away or go in the hallway, and they were allowed, by some contract that you signed, to select 1 or 2 pieces of your senior work for the department or the college's or the university's collection.
Okay.
And one of my pieces was selected, along with Allison, Adrian, what was her last name at the time? I'm blanking out now because that always happens. But anyway, my artwork had been in the dean's office along with hers and several other people's, and other classes and other students and so on and so forth. Then poof, they were all gone. So I went to go inquire about it. I went to see Allison. It must have been like after I spoke with you.
Yep.
And she said, "Wow, really? You know." And there's rumors of all these tunnels and stuff that could be stocked in tunnels. I hope it didn't go into a dumpster. And she says, I also have a dilemma. I have all these incredible 4x5 chromes, negatives. Let's call them negatives of exquisite work with no attributions. I have no idea who these belong to.
Yeah, yeah.
So that was something. And then the last SMU thing is SMU. Well, I'm always going to go back to SMU. It took a long time to say UMass Dartmouth. So you got all this vitality, all this incredible. I mean, we had Alexander Nesbitt. He was the father of American typography, wandering the halls with his Nehru jacket. I mean, Robert Motherwell, I met him. He was a friend of Ed Tonieri's, wandering the halls. And what happened? I mean, and then it came into a dull thud. I can't say a roaring crash, but a dull thud with the Star Store.
So one of the things that kind of ties into that, and it goes back to your comment about the Eisteddford Festival at Dartmouth in the woods and that, and bringing these groups to campus. What I intuited,
I remember that part of that conversation.
Remember that? I remembered some things that people have kind of said was there was a point where the campus maintenance, the way the campus was maintained, became more important than what you did on the campus. And I said, so why did they stop the Dartmouth Woods things that used to be down there towards where the pond was, in that area down there? Where
Cedar Dell,
Cedar Dell, in that area. And I says, well, because they got tired of all the people showing up. They get 20,000 people. So they got tired of people showing up. They didn't like them with using the restrooms. They didn't like the garbage left behind. I said they didn't like the fact it was free advertising for the university to recruit future students. You didn't like that. I mean, I got into an argument with one of the administrators about why in the hell is there on Route 18 in New Bedford, there was a billboard highlighting a degree program at Sacred Heart in Providence, or Newport. And I said, why is that there when what should be there is something that highlights the degree programs at UMass Dartmouth? Oh, well, you can't afford the billboard. That's too expensive. I said, really? What's a billboard run? Give me a number. He said, well, probably about $12,000. I said, so let me
season, yeah.
Yeah, so answer me this. How much do you charge students? Well, I forget what it was, but then let's just say in round numbers it was about $18,000 or $19,000. So I said, so if you got one student who saw that billboard and decided to enroll, and he told a couple friends, and he got 3 or 4 of them, they pretty much wipe out that expense, don't they?
Yeah.
And I go, that's how you have to work this system here, is you can't look at the expense and say no. You've got to look at the expense and say, how can we cover that? And be creative about it. And one of the things I learned about at the time that I got frustrated with Dartmouth, mainly the Dartmouth campus, is intractable. Because they hadn't done certain things in such a long time. Well, we never did that. I said, well, I actually used to do this stuff in the 70s and into the early 80s. It was part of the fiber of the campus.
Institutional memory seemed to have been...
Well, those people retired. They left. Nobody knew Eisteddford when Howard Glazer retired, in 2002? And then he's got his archives, are there in our archives on campus. And but people don't know that. They don't know he taught calligraphy. They don't know he was actually a major calligrapher. I knew who he was when I came here because I did a semester of calligraphy
Peter
work.
Lunda was nationally known for his teaching methods and such.
Exactly, in art education and watercolor. And so it's like, how come we're not really pitching this stuff out there? I said, if it was me, every time I drive in here and come off of Route 195, I pass this really big water tower coming in before I hit the campus on that crossroad. Mm-hmm. And I said, how come you don't work with the city and say, you know what, next time you guys paint it, we'll help cover the cost of the paint if you'll put Home of UMass Dartmouth on it. Oh, we couldn't do that. They'd never go for that. I said, well, I'm going to tell you something. Where I came from, DeKalb, Illinois, has a water tower on the west end of town on Route 88, and they have another one on the east end of town on Route 88. And you know what's on the side of that? Home of the NIU Huskies. Both of them. And you know why? Because they were happy to have the university offer to pay for the paint if they got the crews and painted those towers. Yeah. And it's the biggest, in the Midwest, of course, you can see it for miles around.
Yeah.
I said, how could you not see the value of that? I said, the value is when people go somewhere, especially people going to Cape Cod, they need to see something from UMass Dartmouth, and you're hidden in this little mound here in Dartmouth. Nobody knows you're here. I said, you can't even see you from the highway.
Bowl.
Yeah, exactly. And I said, but when you're going to the Cape, those kids are thinking about going to college. Well, there's a university here. It's called UMass Dartmouth. Can we go off and take a look?
Subliminal reinforcement. Yeah.
No. Not until probably in the last maybe decade or so did they start realizing that they needed to do some of this stuff. Actually, what was funny was I once said to someone, I said, well, how can we at least update the billboard we have on Route 18 going into New Bedford? And they said, what? I said, well, there's a billboard there that the former chancellor, Gene McCormick, had put up that basically said, welcome to New Bedford, and, sponsored by da-da-da, and UMass Dartmouth. I said, that's great eye candy. That gives people a sense that they're not only welcome to New Bedford, but you're being welcomed by a university that is here.
Was up. My dad was a trainee instructor for Berkshire Hathaway.
Yep.
And that was one of the original textile education buildings right across from the old, it was across from Glazer Glass.
Oh, yeah, where Nibbit is. Yep.
Right.
Yep, exactly.
And they had a gymnasium in there, and that first echelon of textile graduates came from there.
Right.
But you said something, I remember now the second thing. You said that the issue at hand was that these phenomenal programs that we had on that campus, they were all personality-driven and not culture-driven, and that hit me like a sledgehammer. How true? Because once the Colberts passed, there's that. Once Howard Glasser left,
retired,
that was gone, and it just went on up the line, which was really, really sad.
But let me cut in because that's important. That's an important point, because when you build alumni relations, and you ask alumni what do they remember most from their time. Like for me, if they ask me about Temple or Cincinnati, what do I remember? I'm not going to remember the dean, the chancellor, the president, may know a little bit about the football team, maybe baseball, but that's about it. But I'm going to say, well, I studied with Frank Herman, or I remember John coming down the hallway and telling me to get back in the studio when I was at Temple. I said, I remember the faculty, because that's kind of what got me through the system. And once I got there, and when I went to graduate school, one of the things I did was looking at the faculty portfolios, because when you went to graduate school, and if you visited, this is before online, so I graduated in 79, so before online, you could walk into the office and say to the secretary, can I take a look at the portfolios? All the faculty in the college, there it's called Design, Art, Architecture, and Planning, all had their portfolios. From this was the Fine Arts Department. All their portfolio, you could pull the portfolio out, you could flip through their slides. I said, okay, I want to work with this one, I want to work with this one, this one, this one, this one. And that's how we used to pick out our committees, because we were not taking formal classes. We were working in studios, and we were having graduate classes, but we didn't have to take painting. We already had degrees in painting. We were doing more painting. And it was a great way to introduce yourself. But if you take me back in time, what I remember is I mainly remember the people that were on my committee, my MFA committee. I don't remember anything else about the administration or any of that stuff. And Temple, all I remember is a few of my teachers. I don't remember much beyond that. And that's because I ran into Rocky and Don. I mentioned that before. Later in life, I would run into them. But I think the mistake that folks make is that not only are programs personality driven, but the alumni relationship is personality driven. It's not the university. It's someone at the university. Even if someone says, well, I just really follow their football team, blah, blah, blah. But, I studied with so-and-so. They remember that. There's still going to be that familial connection. And I don't understand why that's such a soft touch here. I mean, it was like when offside, but it gives you an idea. So I come from high school. We had 1,500 students in my graduating class, right?
Wow.
So good size.
Yeah, it's five times mine.
Yeah, we had a really good, we had a pretty big, pretty good athletic program. We were one of the best wrestling programs in the state, in Pennsylvania. Good in football, decent in baseball, okay in basketball, but we had our own football field, right? And it had plenty of stands for not only the home team but the away team, locker rooms, all that kind of stuff. The first time I went to go see a UMass Dartmouth football game, I go, holy crap, this looks like our practice field in high school.
Yeah.
And that's what I realized, that, again, the eye test, that sometimes decisions administratively are made by looking at numbers called analytics. Mm-hmm. Numbers is like baseball. I hate analytics.
Yeah.
And they're not looking at the people. They're not watching faces. They're not looking at how people respond. They're not looking at posture.
Exactly.
And I said, if you don't factor those things in, you're going to have a really bad product. It's not going to get anywhere.
Right.
And I think that's the same thing with UMass Dartmouth. Division III doesn't mean you have to do everything at a subpar level. It just means you have people that are more committed as student athletes than athletes who happen to take classes now and then. It's a little different deal.
Right.
No nils, that kind of thing.
And that's changed since well, I was part of that group of faculty, that adjunct faculty, and I think I'm still the only one ever MFA to teach in a college of business. Mm-hmm. But I remember Dr. R guy who quit medicine to go back to teaching because he said medicine is not medicine anymore.
Yeah.
And his signature's on my stepmother's death certificate, and we had long conversations. And I remember seeing him that morning, like I thought something wrong with him. He was like bouncing around like lost, and he said, "I can't believe it. They just let me go." And the next thing you know, I got my letter of separation. And then, if I had any brains, mm-hmm. having been one of the very few adjuncts in the union, kind of a babe in the woods kind of thing. I could have. There's a 100-day letter, and then there's the Mass Council Against
MCAS, discrimination.
Discrimination, because we were all of a certain age. We all had gray hair, and so on and so forth. Yeah. And that's what happened to that place. And so then there's no institutional memory. There's no cultural memory at all. People humming about this building, and I'm sorry, I still to me, it's still, I go back, it's embryonic for me, mm-hmm. because that was, my earliest years, of development there, and that was really important for us, but hopefully, once the Artists Index gets proper funding, and it's not just from grants, because it's always been a crapshoot. Yeah. And now it's banging your head against the wall, probably, if anything is even going to exist.
Need to find a sponsor.
Yeah, exactly. some deep-pocketed sponsors, because that's, we want to do a series on SMU and a series on Swain. And there's just so much history. Yep. It all,
and the alumni are getting older.
Exactly. Don Wilkinson will tell you that they're just, there was that one month. It was like last year. There was like six of them passed in the span of almost mm-hmm. a month or 6 weeks.
Right.
So it's pretty bad. But totally off topic, and it's BU, and it's only because, as a fluke. It goes all the way back to the University of Miami, where we were having a private crit. Somebody, underclassman, bursts in and saw my work, which was up for crit, and says, "Oh, Cy Twombly," and he's like, "Oh, I'm sorry," and he realized that he was interrupting, and he took off. And I never much looked into Cy Twombly, and I thought, "Oh, that's another student," and
right,
whatever. Then I found out who Cy Twombly was, and said, "Oh, you want to see some of his work?" No. I don't want to get that in my head. Anyway, so David Richardson, who you know, he and his wife Jane Ferris Richardson.
Right.
David is like, you got to look. So anyway, long story short, there's a Cy Twombly exhibit at the MFA a couple of years back. I think it was before the pandemic. And my friend Bob Brodesky says, well, it's about time we went and checked them out. So we went there. But on the way to his gallery in the MFA, we see this Sir Frank Bowling Jr., and said, well, it's on our way, let's go in. And both of us are painters. And painters are a different ilk. And they must terrorize the security guards in museums because we're going right up to the damn thing. We're looking at it at angles and stuff. This guy's surface treatment was, oh my God, really, it was wet your pants good. You'd have to put on Depends or something to look at this work. But all the while we were there, because we were struck from the first piece going through the whole thing, and we see this elderly black gentleman with white beard, and I said, what's the blues player got to do with the paintings? And it wasn't until we finally worked our way around I realized that's Sir Frank Bowling Jr. He's the painter. The reason why they made the video is because he was supposed to come to Boston, but he's like, I think, 90-something now, and he wasn't in good health, and he had to stay there, so he made a little presentation sitting in his wheelchair.
Yeah.
And it was like, wow. He was an instructor at BU. He's from British Guiana.
Okay, yeah.
And it was like, wow, why didn't we ever hear of this guy?
Yeah.
Okay, so a couple of years goes by. I said to my friend Bob Deck and Bob Brodesky, let's go to the MFA. There's a guy named John Wilson. The guy's charcoal makes me, I don't know how to describe it. It's more than a visual experience. It's just something, charcoal.
Yeah.
Okay,
yeah.
And I never looked at charcoal that way. So my friend Bob says, well, you're probably like interested because, you know, he's an African American, you know, your wife's family and such. And I'm like, no, it was just charcoal.
Yeah.
So anyway, we went. Another one from British Guiana, who was also on faculty at BU. Why?
Wow.
Why? And not that I know everything, but why have I never heard of the art curricula, the department at BU, in the same tones as other departments?
Yeah.
That's what stuns me. And there are more of those. I haven't even looked into it.
Oh, you have no idea. When you're in the Midwest, you
Yeah.
can throw a rock and you can hit another art department, and you've never heard of it.
Really?
Because there are tons of small schools, you know, that have a couple thousand students.
Right,
but
right.
They've all got a Department of Art or a Department of Art and Art History. And so when I was because I spent most of my mature years starting in Ohio, then Indiana, and then Illinois, and I got used to the network, you know, Bluffton College and Tiffin College and all these little places, Baldwin Wallace and Berea. Some are somewhat famous because the Shulas, one of the father, big coach, you know, Dolphins and all that.
Don Shula, he was the man when I was on the University of Miami campus,
he was, and I think he played either at Berea College, no, not Berea, but Baldwin Wallace College, which is not too far from Cleveland, so that was kind of seen as a hotbed of coaching, but it's different in the Midwest because here you do have small colleges, but they're private. The ones in the Midwest, it's a mix of private and public. There's a lot more public, I think, access to education in the Midwest, and here, from what I can tell from New England, you either got to pay a boatload of money because now these schools that we're talking about in Boston, all in, it's upwards of $90,000 a year now, and it's like, who the heck can do that? You know, nobody. I don't care how much money they make. You can't pay it, and then if you graduate, then you're gonna cripple yourself trying to pay off that debt.
I am an anomaly. At SMU, it was $600 a year.
Yep, back in the day.
So $2,400 for 4 years of education, which was totally paid off by a full ride scholarship at the University of Miami because of the education. I mean, I actually had faculty members saying, "Where the fuck did you go to college?
Yeah, where'd you learn all this stuff?"
You know, and I, you know, and then, you know, really quickly. So now I got a stipend and an assistantship, and it just so happened that the professor Jim Wilson, who was a glassblower, who would go to Florence every year, was diagnosed with cancer over there. And I was told good news, bad news, and I said, I'm always the bad news guys first. You know, he said, Jim's got cancer. Oh, well, what's the good news? Well, you get to take over his foundation class.
Yeah, exactly.
So I was instructor of record, and I got paid for that.
Yep.
So that doesn't happen anymore. That just does not happen
Less
anymore.
likely.
It's less likely. And for that, I'm eternally grateful. There's one more thing that's bouncing around in my brain right now.
Anything else about BU?
No, it wasn't about that. But I do want to have you come back as Adrian Tió, master printmaker. Because I swore I wouldn't go down this path with you.
I'll come back as Adrian Tió, artist.
Artist. Oh, yeah.
Master printmaker. That's way above my pay grade.
I don't know.
I just do my thing.
It's going to be one of those things. I'll wake up at 3 o'clock in the morning. Well, nobody will be around to
Yeah,
care.
yeah.
But it was important, very important. And it was one of those missing pieces of the puzzle that really requires. Oh, Mount Ida. History repeats itself. And when so we all got laid off, and then God bless her, Kate Buck from the campus store said, how come no book artists? I said, Kate, they kicked us out. I mean, well, you've always liked one of the first guys to put in your book orders, so if you got nothing to do, you want to come work for me. So I went to work for her.
I remember reading it, seeing there. Yep.
Exactly. So the point being that when they acquired Mount Ida, my first thought was, oh God, it's the art and artisanry program scenario of Swain.
Mm-hmm.
And I had worked, I don't know if you know, as the interim marketing director for in fact, that was even the problem, because they couldn't describe what they were, for professional and continuing education.
Right.
They didn't even know what to call themselves.
Right.
Was it a college? Was it a whatever? And I saw all of the hickeys and things you're not supposed to see. And I've seen a couple of chancellors with vision come in on campus. And I said to myself, that person isn't going to last too long. Why? So I guess it is cultural in a caustic kind of a way, huh?
It can be. I think what's unique about Mount Ida is that UMass Dartmouth wasn't involved in Mount Ida. That was the system.
Yeah,
so
the
what was
UMass
unique
system,
about it,
yeah.
where when we merged, as it were, in I thought a somewhat collegial sort of way with Swain, we absorbed it, but we as a campus absorbed that. And I don't think I can't tell you what the system might have done with that, but probably nothing.
Yeah, because we didn't get the funerary sciences.
Right. And there were some other programs that were cherry-picked by Amherst and maybe something with Lowell.
Yeah, we got fashion and interior design, which
we actually wanted, because one of the things, it's one of the challenges for me was realizing that I'm on a campus where the way the dynamic of the campus set up and the way the campus looks, there should be more women here than men, but there aren't. And my instincts told me, because the campus is not really warm and appealing. So when Davina Grossman came on board, one of the things we started doing was going back to the buildings, the brutalist business, is looking at what the original plans, the designs, because our
they
friend,
were phenomenal.
They're in the architect, they're in the office, they're in the archives. The model is still there. And looking at and understanding how the campus was supposed to look, not the way they're mowing it, kind of thing. And understanding that it was supposed to be lots of plantings. Each building was color-coded. I think I want to say CVPA was lime green, but don't hold me to that. Right. And what the color coding did, which segue, when they repurposed the library. If you go in the library now, next time you go visit, take a look at the carpeting. And then get in the elevator and go to the next floor and look at the carpeting again. And then do the same thing as you go up. And if you look at the kiosk in the elevator, you'll see that they're color-coded. So they're color-coded to the colors of the original campus buildings that
it was
architect had put
orange
together.
And purple.
Was orange? Is orange? There's orange, violet, blue.
Yeah.
Blue was engineering.
Right.
I can't remember if somebody with yellow. Nursing might have been yellow, but anyway, that grouping of colors. So what they did was they designed it so the carpeting on the main floor, they're pretty balanced. But then when you go to the next one of the colors dominates. When you go to the next one, a different color dominates. But that's how all the campus buildings
Right.
were designed to do. So they kind of made a microcosm out of Rudolph's vision in the way they even thought about just the accents on each of the floors in the,
So as an homage.
as an homage,
Yeah.
as it were. So now we used to talk about that. I says, when you're on campus, one of the hardest things I have recruiting students is when you look around, you can't see where you are. I said, we see the campanile, that's great, but there's no marker that says that's the library, that's this. Oh, well, this is not that kind of campus. And then I find out, actually, all the buildings had color-coded signage
Right.
when the
And
buildings
even
would
had like
open.
a system for banners hanging off those
Yes.
jets.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
So I said, so what happened is I would say not lethargy so much, but something similar, that as those things aged out, instead of replacing them, they just got rid of them. And they did that throughout the campus. So the campus that I came to in 2007 was relatively naked compared to how it would have looked back in your day when it was when it was very fresh. And so that's why Davina's short term, 2.5, not quite 3 years, we were working with committees of people from the communities, making sure Fall River, New Bedford, Dartmouth were all included, and talking about how we can take some of the literature and go back and take the overhang. They're supposed to have a garden up there, put that garden back in. And so he got this overhang that's supposed to connect the administration building to the student union, right? And it says, oh, well, you can't put anything up there because it can't absorb the weight. So we look at the drawings,
It was
and it was
engineered to do so.
designed to not only absorb the weight, but it had drainage so that the plantings had a way of draining down below
Right.
and coming out.
And
This
there were
kind of
even
thing.
bridge. There was even a concept for connecting some of the buildings with like flyovers or whatever
Yep.
you want to call them.
And this was the only one that they ever built, but
Yeah.
there's going to be more of that.
Yeah.
But the whole thing was he felt that it needed to have hanging greenery. So in the buildings inside, if it couldn't be greenery, it would be banners, but the banners were color coded to that building. And then the greenery would be on the outside. And I remember thinking, and the more of that you do is good because you'll attract more women. If you have greenery, you have color, because
And yeah, of course,
they tell me
people are
they
going
were-
to think, oh, he's going down the gender trail there.
if you talk to anybody
But
that's
it's
in
it's
architecture, that's how it
demographics.
works.
It's demographics,
Yeah.
cut and dry. I mean, we have capons and we have hens. I mean, and again,
Yeah.
I'll probably get in trouble for that statement
But
too.
it's just a different way of seeing the world,
Right.
and they always tell you if you're going to sell a house, repaint the front door and put fresh flower plantings on either side of that door. It'll help your sales.
Right.
If you
Curb
don't do
appeal.
that, curb appeal. And so we got into this campaign during her tenure about doing exactly that. And a lot of rebuilding, a lot of replanting. We work with a guy who's now deceased that ran a big nursery down in South Dartmouth. I forget his name.
Oh, Silva.
John. No, John. He might have got stuff from them, but he was an architectural kind of a planner kind of guy with things. So anyway,
Yeah.
as he was working different projects and he was trading out, because some of his jobs were every couple of years they would take out plantings and put in fresh ones. Well, they started taking those plantings that they would donate. Well, they started bringing them to the campus, and that's how we got the plantings to get the color back. They added sidewalks. They started realizing that you had to create curb appeal in the campus. It can't be about where you park your car.
Right.
It has to be when you get in the middle of the campus, how do you get, even their signage was inaccurate. How do you make the signage accurate enough that if you come in from what used to be parking lot 8, what are you looking for? Well, you're looking for CVPA, you're looking for the library, you're looking for admin. Get them there, but then have new signage that gets you to the buildings that move past it.
Right.
But color code them
Yeah.
so that at a glance they go, oh, blue, way out there, that blue, that's engineering.
Right.
I see it. And that's what we started bringing back, because they would find things like the doors were all painted, some buildings
Yeah,
gray.
it was
They were
orange
painted-
in Larts. Yeah.
They were in
Yeah.
black, they were
Yeah.
painted gray,
Yeah.
but if you went and scratched on them,
Yeah.
you realized that they were bright orange, bright
Right.
yellow green, bright this, bright that. And I go, man, I cannot believe how lazy the maintenance was. It's really about lazy maintenance and not having an architect's office that kept their thumb on them and saying, no, this is what Rudolph designed. We need to maintain it. So now they do. And I'll give them credit for finding a way to kind of engage, basically said, embrace the concrete.
Right.
And they have. Probably too late, because they let other schools gain traction while UMass Dartmouth kind of just sat there in stasis. And then, because you're waiting for me to say something about it, when they abandoned the Star Store, they really gave up an important anchor with New Bedford. But they not only gave up the Star Store, they also gave up one of the continuing education buildings, which is down the way where the coffee shop is there, right there on Purchase Street. It's the old.
The Masonic building?
No, the Masonic's the other way. That's up the other. This is right down the hall.
Coffee shop.
It's the next block. It's now owned by Bridgewater.
Yeah. It was Cherry and Webb.
Cherry and Webb building.
Yeah.
So the Cherry and Webb building
Yeah.
actually now
Yeah.
is outright owned by BCC.
Yeah.
Their foundation bought that,
Right.
and we're no longer in there, even though we outfitted it, we set it up, we got our Cafe Arpeggio
Right.
in there,
Yeah.
we rented spaces and all that. We backed completely out of that.
Yeah. And they had space on the ground floor of Star Store, and then they also
Right. Well,
in
then
there as well. Yeah.
because that was by design.
Yeah.
When they refurbished the Star Store, they said,
Right.
well, a piece of this, about 10%, 12% of the square footage needs to also include BCC to give them a toehold before they got into Cherry and Webb.
Right.
And then we were also across the street in the former bank when they had the Ocean Explorium.
Oh yeah, the NBIS.
Yep, and
yeah.
they pulled out of that, so that got us out of bringing kids in to study about science, because a lot of these kids are coming from families that came here for whaling and fishing and stuff like that. Never been to the ocean. They don't know anything about it, and this was their way to introduce them to it, but get people re-engaged in there, because we built this complex on the south end, SMAS, but how do you bridge that gap between what's going on in high school and them? And that's when they have this thing called C-Lab.
Yeah.
And it explains a lot of that.
Yeah, with Dutra.
Yep. Well, it's the woman runs it now. It's not,
Oh well, I mean, Dutra was the progenitor, I guess, of that program,
right.
so to speak.
But there's a woman that runs it now, and they focus on I want to say fifth graders. So it really gets into grabbing these kids before they go into middle school and getting them excited about understanding how the sea works. And now they're talking about the wind farms and all this kind of stuff. And that's exactly the kind of things you need. But the university used to be point on those things
Yeah.
and retrench from it. They walked away from the ATMC in Fall River. They walked away
Yeah,
from this.
my office was up there. Yeah.
There was a place that they built that they never ever got into. They were going to do bioengineering up there in Fall River on Route 24. Never took it over. It got turned over by the system, gave it to the medical school in Worcester, so they could have a place a little closer to that. But
Yeah.
so there was a time when we were, as a university, really
Forward thinking.
community involved,
Right.
but because your presence recruits people to want to go to school there, and now that they continue to shrink that, I think they're going to not pass the eye test, because nobody can see the campus where it's located off of those back roads. It
Right.
just has no visibility.
Exactly.
And so I don't know what's going to go on. I mean, I've really felt bad about the students that 2 years ago show up and find out they've got basically 2 weeks to clear out their stuff,
To go
because
to Bed Bath and Beyond.
well, there was even a question about whether or not they had a place to go, because they didn't move them all. That's not what happened. What happened was the guy who runs our building, Jeff Glassman of Darnett Landing LLC.
Right.
He heard what was going on, and what happened was there was no space for the painters, graduate painters, or the graduate ceramists, because the small spaces they had, some of the other folks could use. You could move interior design and architecture in there. They could bunker down. They kind of bunkered in with the design folks. Because they can use similar equipment and things like that. Fashion design, I think, had found a space where they could get into that. But not the fine arts graduate students that had come in, and some of them from around the world.
Yeah.
A student from Turkey, from Iran.
Yeah.
And here they go, what do you mean? I got an apartment right down the street, and where's my studio?
Yeah.
And so, long story short, Jeff stepped in and heard about it, and he had 2 studios that had become vacant. So he reached out to some of the students who some of us had kind of mentioned to him, and he turned one of the studios in for ceramic students, so they could do anything in there that they needed to do.
Right.
They couldn't do the kind of firing they wanted to do, but there was a former grad across the hallway, and she had a kiln, so they could at least get things pre-fired before they could do the final, what they call the greenware.
Right.
And he gave another studio over to some painters, and so free. He
yeah.
just put them in there, and I think it was going to be a semester only. I think he kept them for the year. I don't know that the university ever thanked him. I don't know that they ever paid him back. I don't know that I never heard any acknowledgement from the university about his generosity. And interestingly, some of those students, because of that relationship with Hat Street, they're still in town. It's not with the university,
Yeah.
because they didn't do anything with New Bedford. they were kind of abandoned.
Right.
So I wish them all the best, but I don't know how you're going to recruit graduate students, in particular, to that campus where there's really nothing. There's no graduate merit housing. It doesn't roll with the way graduate students need to be treated.
I remember doing marketing assessment and such, and having to. It was like a tsunami of sewage. There's no other way to describe it in any analogy. And then a bunch of us would get together and go into the cafeteria and just have coffee.
Mm-hmm.
And somehow it got out there that what we were discussing, it's First Amendment rights. I mean, we're not creating an insurrection. We're just trying to figure out how each of our departments can communicate with each other for something better overall.
Right.
And we were told to stop it. You can't do that anymore. Excuse me?
Yeah.
Sort of like what's going on now in the administration that's occupying the White House now. That was that mindset then, and it was just awfully bizarre. And then being in public relations marketing for the 40 years, which was just a fluke. It was just bread and butter, because the painter's got to do something else. And seeing how lacking they were in, that was a place I still love that place.
Right.
There's just that I can't explain it. It's going like in your childhood home or whatever. That's when you went into the orchestra pit, I was going to ask you, did you find any McDonald's bags that probably had, that I got my lunch? I mean, I used to sleep on piles of stuff down there.
Oh yeah.
Painting scenery and getting ready for the opera productions that we did.
Yeah.
And it's a sad thing. We've lost a sense of community.
Mm-hmm.
NECI, I don't know why NECI, New England Institute for Culinary Arts, New England Culinary Institute up in Montpelier, Exeter Junction. You couldn't get away from that institution. Mm-hmm. Everywhere you went, you go to this coffee shop, it's owned and operated by NECI, and those are the students doing their placement there. You go to the spice shop and the gift, that's run by, they own the entire town. And they had a presence there. And, I remember downtown businesses were waiting for these students to pull into downtown because it was survival for them. It's like, it's more cups of coffee I'm selling, or more this and more that. And then it was like, I'm not making any money. It's like, they're students, they'll help the bottom line, but they're not going to propel you to the next step and level in your business.
Right.
And then, as you well know, with the demise, there was that period, that blast, concussive period, right after the blast, where it was just, you couldn't hear, you couldn't see, you were like stunned, and it seemed like everything dropped. Guest checks went down, and so on and so forth. And then I guess somewhere along the line, maybe because of a couple of those students who, Miss Navarre, for example, who decided, screw this. And they started their own little cooperative on William Street, and it was like, hell no, we won't go. And it sort of like everybody could exhale again and inhale again, That was really, 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 really important.
It goes back to, remember, I made my comment that there's analytics involved.
Yeah.
So I think that you've got administrations, and this isn't just UMass Dartmouth, this is across the country, that are focused on, the phrase is the bottom line. But what that means is, to your comment about whether you're making enough money or not, is if you're already fixated on looking for the right answers that you've already written down, and all you're going to do is anything that
matches,
fits that,
yeah.
Then you're doing the same thing with your budgets, and you're not using your eyes to walk around and take a look and see what's going on. I remember having a comment once with a guy walking in a Star store when I was teaching printmaking, and I said, can I help you? I didn't know who the hell he was. Didn't introduce himself. Didn't have ID. He said, no, we're just walking around. I says, well, I'm one of the professors here in the building, and I'm former dean. I said, anything you need to know, I could pretty much tell you anything about this building or the one on main campus. Oh, no, we're good, we're fine. And they just kept walking around. Well, these guys were coming from, the facilities management, eyeballing the building. And one of the complaints I heard was, as they're walking through the floor, there wasn't anybody there. But he didn't ask me, where are the students? And what I would have said to him says, well, today is Tuesday. I said, I teach here in the morning, but later in the afternoon, they teach over here. And those students who are now on main campus taking classes will be here for those classes. And the graduate students who are not here now are probably on main campus teaching their classes as graduate TAs, but they'll be back in their studios not only this afternoon, but later tonight, because they're always in here till near 2 o'clock in the morning. Never asked the question. Never wanted to know what the story was. They just saw, oh yeah, empty hallways, let's get rid of this sucker. We can cut this loose. There's nobody here. And I kept saying, but that's not true. That's not how it works. I said, you understand that we're a moving tide that moves back and forth between us. So at certain points, I'll have a couple of shuttle buses show up and unload 40 undergraduate students having their first art classes here in the Star Store, and they'll be here on Tuesday, Thursday mornings. Okay? I says, yeah, and then we take them back to main campus where they go and they get lunch, and they take and do their classes on main campus. But they're back here every Tuesday, Thursday. That's 40 people who will come back as advanced students up the line, so I expect them to be in and out of this building over the next 4+ years. I said, that doesn't include the graduate students who don't take classes on main campus for the most part. They're always in this building. And I said, there's an art history course. I can take you to this big room that you say is empty, and when there's a lecture going on, it's full. It's not only full, but sometimes I have to stand in the back, give my seat to somebody. I said, but you weren't here for that. Oh, well, I go home at 4:30, and, we don't work past a certain time. I says, well, that's not the way we work down here. We work down here when we open in the morning at 8 o'clock, and we don't kick anybody out till we kick them out about just before 2 o'clock. We roust them out about 1:30. And I've got people that are in here that entire time because the process they takes that kind of deliberation, and I'm grateful that they're here doing that because they could have picked somebody else. And that's pretty much what's going to happen because they lost. UMass Dartmouth can't pass the eye test. I don't care what they do with Bed Bath & Beyond. They'll always be looked down on as the college that took a 78,000 square feet of studio space in New Bedford and gave it up for a much smaller space in a strip mall in an abandoned building. Or a defunct building, for that matter. That's where, matter of fact, I go, Bed Bath & Beyond, that's where I used to get my COVID shots. And that's exactly it. That's where they used to get the shots.
Right, yeah.
And so I think they really failed, not only did they fail the eye test, but they can't seem to get a chancer who sticks for more than 3+ years, who really is invested in the community. They seem to be commuters.
The bumper stickers that were hung around way longer than their half-life.
Yeah.
Save SMU.
Yeah.
These people knew what was going to happen once the state took over. And it's unfortunate. Hey, we've got to wrap this up.
Okay,
but,
sure. I'm good.
This has been...
It's been fun.
It has been fun. And we definitely have to have you come back as
an artist.
As you and talk about your
Right.
process
I'll be
and
working
stuff, because
my other hat.
that's amazing. And with my one visit to Puerto Rico, and the oddest thing that happened on my trip was leaving the island and having some guy from TSA or Customs, whatever, saying, "Do you have any ham in your luggage?"
Really?
Yeah.
What would you be doing with ham in your luggage?
It's like, I don't know. I love jamón Jerez, but this isn't, this is island style here because this is not Jerez. This is not in Spain.
Right, yep.
And I know it's part of the culture, but I would have never thought of sticking
You can order from La Tienda online and you'll get a box in your mail.
Yeah, I know. I would have never think of sticking a joint of smoked ham into my luggage.
You never know.
You never know. Exactly. Well, folks, if you joined us midway or any part after the opening, this episode's guest has been Adrian Tió, who is an artist who specializes in printmaking, who was at one time faculty and dean at UMass Dartmouth, and we are definitely going to have him back. So we hope that this has been entertaining because all of what we've discussed is important. It is historical, especially since we're older now.
Yeah.
It is historical, and the choices that were made that we discussed have affected us now and will affect us in the future. So think twice before you do anything. Take care of yourself and be kind to other people. Bye-bye.
To learn more about the South Coast Artist Index, visit theartistindex.com. Find us on Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube. Be the artist you believe you are, and let's take care of each other out there.